Welcome to That RPG Podcast, where every great adventure starts with a single idea.
I'm DQ, your friendly neighborhood GM.
I'm Courtney Staples, not your friendly neighborhood GM.
And I'm Johnny Law, and I want to see the Epstein list. What the? Files, lists, we got them all here. But more importantly, we have to answer some questions about how to be a better GM in our Dear GM.
Yeah, but this question comes from binders full of women. In fact, from one of our female submitters, one of our players. But she has some questions that it actually involves the word checklist in this Dear GM. So this Dear GM says, is there a mental checklist that you go through or want your players to go through whenever they approach something new that will help them get the most out of a session? So this is a rather broad question. Like, there's a number of ways we can read this. When I think about setting up a session and what I want my players to get out of it and how I want them to approach things, I always go back to the idea of the GM agenda and then the players' agendas. So, and then the Game Master's Guide, which you can read about this, a GM agenda is defined partially as what the premise is. So in the sense that the premise might be, this is a horror game where we explore insecurity. So then by virtue of that agenda, that premise, I might have a need to create a certain mood and have certain game modes be played. Maybe there's lots more downtimes. Maybe my antagonist is more abstract. So as a GM, it's not so much I'm trying to make certain things happen, but I have a certain I guess I am trying to make certain things happen. I'm not trying to determine certain outcomes, though. So I have an agenda. At the same time, the players have an agenda, and the players' agenda is defined by their story hooks. So their characters are driven to do certain things, and in session 0, we figure out what those things are. So when I think of the parallel of those two things, in order to get the players to align with my agenda and me to align with theirs, I want them to be interrogating the fiction as much as possible. And there's a couple ways they can do that. They can do it manually. So they're exploring environments. They're manipulating the scene, which is one of the actions you can do in OSR Plus. Or they're interrogating what they know about the fiction. So another action is consult the lore, where you might ask, does my character know this? Or I am a cleric, so I know about religion. What do I know about this context? And then we let the dice tell us how much we know. So that's what I want. I want the players to engage, right? But at the same time, in order for them to engage, I have to set up an environment where it's possible to do that work. So that means building scenes with enough material for them to engage with. I know that sounds silly, but it's fundamental. Like, when I get into a scene, what's going to happen if they don't do anything? That's your call to action. What choices do they have in the scene that are meaningful? What sort of things can they do that will lead to outcomes? What are the stakes of the scene? Why does it matter that they're engaging with this? And then finally, what's opposing them? So when what I want the players to get out with is an engagement with the scene in a meaningful way that furthers their agenda, their story hooks, and what they want to do as characters, but also intersects with my agenda, because I'm trying to propel a narrative forward that's going to emerge from their interaction without determining their outcomes. So for me, I think that's the most important thing I think I'm trying to get players to do. Beyond that, I think it's up to the dice and what happens naturally.
So you're basically saying that when you walk into a session, you know where you left off the last session, so you have a general idea of the trajectory, and you want to make sure that moving through that trajectory, you are trying to tell the story that you want to tell, or at least lay out the path for it, but then B, the player agenda, because you're saying the player agenda, but you're not saying what the players actually. You're saying the story hooks that they've glommed onto is what you're playing off of more.
I guess I shouldn't say player agenda. I should say character. The player's agenda is the character's agenda. So the character's agenda are their story hooks.
So you're still focusing not on the actual players behind the NPCs wants. You're focusing on what the characters should be, because you're putting out the buffet.
Yes.
So that's you're not taking orders from people that you're not hitting multiple spots. You're putting out one buffet that has, and then they can choose what they want and how much of what they want that you were offered. But that's what you're saying next to your second part. Wow, that was a great metaphor. I'm just gonna say, all right. Good job, John.
Nicely done. Nicely done.
Got it. Still got it. You're trying to set, so that is your little accoutrements that you're going on the buffet to draw people on. Like, oh, we got shrimp and this great cocktail sauce right here, and then there's also horseradish on its own and some fresh lemon and whatever. And it's these things that kind of pull them into the aspects that you want to offer.
Exactly. Like you want to entice.
And then you have a list.
Well, it's literally structured as a list. It's literally, because if I think of the scene in my notes, which there will be a video that shows you how to structure scenes, but when you think of the structure of the scene, the notes, there's bullet points of here are things that can happen in the scene event-wise, like that I want to trigger if they're triggered. But then there's discoveries, and those discoveries might be things they can find in the environment. Maybe there's like a treasure to be found, but there may also be clues that are discovered or story hooks that are discovered. Story hooks meaning something that their character had that they had invented as players for the character. Like maybe they find a note that talks about their long lost brother, and that was one of the big story hooks. If I can insert that into the scene meaningfully, I should, because that's going to entice the player to interact.
I would say that, like, I mean, obviously I can't speak to as a GM going in with a mental checklist, but I do feel like as a player too, there's like stuff that I want to do ahead of time to like get in the zone. I just reminding myself of where we are, like glancing at my notes from the last time. Although I do also definitely lean heavily on the GMs to like go over that at the start. So if you GM, please be knowledgeable of what just happened in the previous session. But also stuff like reminding myself of character goals, and like I might have jotted down stuff about that last time, or also stuff like getting into character. Like if they do an accent, then I might say a few lines in that accent. Or John, I think you had the tip of like saying the Pledge of Allegiance in an accent, and I do that sometimes. From the player side, there isn't nearly as much prep, but it is good to like glance at your notes, glance at what's in your inventory, or like what's on your character sheet, what stances in OSR Plus's case you've used or haven't used, what tags you might want to invoke, like especially if it's been a while since you've invoked, especially negative tags on yourself, like how can you potentially weave those into the scenario. And yeah, then I think it's just getting back in the first scene, whatever that might be. Definitely paying attention to what everybody's talking about, because losing focus in that initial part can make it pretty rough.
I think it's really, it becomes really obvious when you've structured a scene incorrectly. Like from my experience, like when I've had moments where I'm like, oh crap, this scene doesn't have enough for it to be valuable to the players. Like, so maybe I didn't put a discovery in there, or there's nothing meaningful to extract. There's no meaningful choice coming out of it. When you're missing one of those components, it'll become immediately obvious, because your players will start like just middling about like mice. And then you think it's their fault, but it's not. It's your fault, because you didn't create the hooks they need to do something. So like if they enter a room and there's nothing to interact with, and there's no inciting incident, and there's no stakes, nothing will happen if they don't do anything. Why are they in the room? What's the point? That's the problem you have to solve as a GM in every scene. Because as they move from scene to scene, in order to get their engagement out of it, you have to put things in front of them to engage with. And it seems very obvious, but it's like you've got to go through that checklist with every scene. Am I hitting these beats? Because if I don't have them in there, the scene's going to fall flat, and you're going to feel frustrated. Your player's going to be frustrated. So I guess that's the purest answer to that question, is that checklist I have to do per scene.
No, that makes sense. Like I've certainly noticed that happening, and it just feels awkward when everybody notices that. Like you're just kind of chatting in character, like what should we do next? Okay, I look over here. Oh, there's nothing over there.
Talking about, Courtney?
No, I feel like it happens in every.
It happens everywhere. I've had it happen. And when I realize that, there's ways to recover from it. When you realize that's happening, and I've had it happen before, what I do then is like delay for a moment, like maybe have them add something to the scene for a second, so that you can then look at your notes and look at your map and say, are there hooks I can quickly move here? And can I like adjust the scene to make it meaningful again? Because otherwise you're going to be in a dead zone. And that's the worst, because there's not really much you can do besides bull out of that. And they're going to see through that. I mean, if you're the type of GM that's going to improvise everything, then it doesn't matter, because they're used to see bullshit. But this is not the kind of, what do I call it? This is not the methodology I espouse, so I can't speak to that.
and to clarify though, there's like railroading, right? There's bull, and what you're talking about is actually like it's here. Like it's between those, but also on another plane. Like it's not, because you're trying to allow creative,
give them meaningful choices,
or not creative solutions. Like everyone should hopefully allow creative solutions, but you're trying to allow the the narrative to develop as a collaborative element that you have laid seeds to and nodes and like created a network for them to work through, but also they can design it in any way they want.
And Justin Alexander uses that term very specifically, meaningful choice. I don't know, I don't remember if he borrowed it from somewhere else, but the idea is that it just simply means I could have done otherwise. It's just a basic principle of free will. If there are not meaningful choices, then it's a railroad, right? Or it's a dead scene.
And it could just be A and B, right?
Right.
Technically,
they have to be able to choose something, right? And it can't be, if there's not a meaningful choice, if, no matter what they do, it's going to be this other outcome. That means if you go in a room and the only option is to go through the next door, why did you put them in the room? Just put them in the door on the other side of the door. It's completely pointless for them to be in that room unless there's something to do in that room. For thinking of the room. The room is the same as any scene.
That's so maybe for the novice checklist, cut bloat would be a great thing to add there. The main thing I try to always do is just make sure I have like all my boxes checked. That I have if people are going to go a certain direction, I have some semblance of what's supposed to happen there, and also the overall picture, obviously. But like I'm trying I still haven't carved out the deepest aspect of it. But that's because I'm kind of, you guys are revealing it to me as you go along, which is part of like how I want to play the game. So, but it's, no spoilers, obviously, but I'm telling you two that I play with you and no one else knows what the fuck we're talking about, the other 3 people watching. But it's like, but for me, it's like, it's a very different checklist because I'm not at that level yet where I'm telling the same type of stories I'm telling my first story. And there's a lot of pictures,
Pictures are good.
Yeah, I mean, I like them.
A lot of it is like, it's kind of a safety net, really, this checklist. If you can think of it that way, it's not really supposed to be this like theoretical apparatus, right? That should be confusing and difficult. The novice GM should look at these steps as his safety net. That if you made this checklist, then when you put the characters in the scene, you shouldn't have to worry because they're going to be able to interact with it.
There's a reason to be there. Like that's huge. Like, so it sounds so stupid and simple, but like I don't think I've ever thought about that. I think more about like they walk in, and I guess I do think about it in a different way because I think about like I try to make rooms that have a meaning in a sense of more of a novelty than anything else, like or have a function. It's novelty or function. It's one or the other. But I don't think but more just on the low key aspect, like it could just be information or it could be like I guess like even a place of like respite is a thing. Like you could have a safe room, but that's what it is. But you would intone that there is some comfort or food or something there, right? That like
well, there's more to do, right? So like I mean, if you had like, I'm trying to think of examples from God Beyond the Portal, but there's different levels to this too. Like if I'm running a dungeon crawl, OSR Plus has a way of running a dungeon crawl that's abstracted, but if I'm running a dungeon crawl, when we're talking about rooms in that case, rooms aren't really scenes necessarily. They can be, but usually the movement between rooms ends up being a scene. Like if I'm on the first layer of a dungeon and this layer is populated by little demon imps or whatever, and they're emerging from some hell portal in the middle of this level, and there's a conflict between the demon imps and these furry, fat slug creatures. Now there's an interplay, right? There's a sense of discovery to happen. Every room isn't going to have all of this checklist, but the whole floor fits the idea of a scene now. There are stakes, like who's going to win this battle, the fat or the demon imps, right? And
I stopped listening when we talked to fat. I'm like, I want to play this. That's all in my head now. I was now playing this out my head.
And if the fat little over the little demon imps, that might be a problem for the players, right? So that's the stakes. There's a conflict at work automatically between the players, the interplay of these 3 elements. There's the call to action when I get into the first room. Maybe I find the eviscerated body of a fat, right? So these are all things now I'm thinking about the scene rather than the literal environment. And that, because there's this interplay, now the players have something to interact with as they move along. And to be clear, I'm not fat shaming. These little furry monsters who are fat, that's what they're like naturally. That's their beautiful state. That's how they are. The little demon imps, they're little cat creatures, and they're skinny and horrible. They're both equally horrible. That's my disclaimer. So
I wanted to go back to something you said earlier, Danielle, about like close to the start of this section about like if your players aren't catching on, then it's like kind of the GM's fault. And I would tend to agree. And it's also like as a player, it feels really uncomfortable when stuff like that happens, and you feel like you should be figuring something out, but you just don't have the stuff with you, and you keep like looking around the scene, looking around the room, examining things, that like nothing's happening. And like at that point, you need to change how you're giving your characters or giving your players information, because clearly they're just not getting it. And at a certain point, it's like it's not your players just being dumb. It's like you got to communicate in a different way and sprinkle around some more stuff for them to find or to do something, like change it up. Otherwise, they'll just be like scrambling and feeling dumb for the rest of the game.
It's usually, oftentimes what happens is if it's part of a larger mystery, it's that you haven't reinforced the clues enough for the players to realize the significance of any one clue. And then if that happens, there's ways to solve it. Either you just give them something, or, you know, like you when you go back to revise, you look at, okay, what's not being reinforced here? Because you do, like this happens too, like in old school games, it's a different type of play. Like, so in old school games, there were puzzles that are solved in very specific ways because that's how the dungeons functioned. But that's the old school methodology. You're playing player skill instead of character skill. So I myself, as the math guy, I'm not, would be the one to solve this because I know how to solve it. My characters are irrelevant in that case. But in more modern games, the solution can't be non-diegetic, which is to say outside of the fiction. It has to come from inside the fiction. But like when you have a puzzle that has no relationship to the fiction, you're not playing in the fiction anymore. And it's unfair that the players don't understand it because the characters can't understand it. There's no context in the game. And this is similar to what you're saying about not having enough clues to solve a mystery, because there's nothing in the environment. There's no meaningful choices to get there. You know,
I feel like that's very much like a video game, metagame kind of concept. But
I mean, this is why I don't like puzzles in most D&D games that aren't solvable from within the fiction, or if they are solvable in the fiction rely on some kind of knowledge that really a puzzle mind would solve. So if you're going to design, for example, an OSR Plus a puzzle, what you would do is you'd have a solution you have in mind, but you have to allow for other solutions too. That if they solve the theme of the problem, then that's the solution. And it's not like I'm going to pull something out of my hat and that's fine. It's more like, I don't know, maybe there's a sphere and you need to get the object inside the sphere, and the sphere is somehow imprisoned with magic, and the magic is dangerous. Like I might have the solution that above on the ceiling, there's a lever you can turn and a symbol that explains it, right? But maybe they never look up there, and they just focus on the pillars that are like controlling the energy. Maybe they've come up with a solution where they all work together and use dispel magic simultaneously on the pillars to dispel it. And then you could say as a GM, all right, well, rationally, logically, that seems to make sense in terms of disrupting the spell momentarily. Maybe it shuts it down for a round so they can go in and grab it, and then it turns back on.
That's cool. It's fucking cool and not cheap. So why not?
Yeah. Like, they put effort into solving it, and it follows from the fiction.
Yeah, and like John, to go back to your mention of video games, it's like those old like point and click adventure games where there are some where if you don't like click a very specific thing at the start of the game, you're just completely like hours later at the end. Like you don't want to set up a situation like that for your players.
That's bad game design right there. Speaking of good game design, complete sidebar. You guys, are you both still on Dropout, or you still on Dropout?
I am so far behind.
I'm very far behind still.
Well, Game Changers was phenomenal, but they released the secret episode today.
Oh,
I did see.
I heard about
email about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's basically Sam gets kidnapped by Brendan Lee Mulligan.
I love it.
And yeah, so it's amazing. It's amazing. It was great to watch tonight. But anyway,
I got to finish watching Very Important People show with my girlfriend Vic. God, I love her so much.
She's something, that's for sure. Well, shit, I feel like I learned a lot on that. I'm gonna check it off my list. Not the Epstein list, which I still haven't received. I've been waiting for it. It's not coming.
We're never gonna check that one off.
Well,
you know what's gonna happen? We're gonna get the list, and it's gonna be literally every Democrat ever, which makes sense. But
hey, if they're on it, cool, fair game.
But we don't have the main one, main, like the one who built the list.
Yeah. It'll be like a bunch of redacted names, and then all the Democrats, and then a bunch more redacted names. It's like, it's suspicious.
And once again, the Democrats, regardless, should be
let them all go down. Burn them all.
Yeah.
Burn them all. That's right.
Send them out.
Burn them.
But yeah, all right. Well,
Our theme is list, guys. Thanks for listening to That RPG Podcast, where every great adventure starts with a single idea. Join us next week for more from our series Scene Check, where we talk about playing evil characters cooperatively, how to design engaging scenes for your campaign, and build a Stranger Things inspired adventure set in a town full of teenage archetypes.